And welcome back, everybody, to a brand new Pens Cast Mailbag episode. This is part one this evening, and as you can see right now, if you are watching on YouTube, it is just me and Snail, the old Pens Cast crew, getting you started tonight. Garrett will be with us at some point during this recording, but this is part one. We got a hefty one tonight and in part two, so we're not going to waste much time. But before we do get started, Snell, how is your as this recording? How is your Tuesday going?
Tuesday is going fine. Had a bunch of beers last night. Had a nice little bonfire. It's freezing cold over here, but
Yeah.
it's a beautiful sunny bluebird day out there. So not too bad. Sucks that we don't really have any Penguins hockey for a little bit here, but how's your Tuesday, man?
My Tuesday was cold as well, much like yours, but we did not have much sun to talk about. It was mostly
Mm.
snowy and blustery, but it's cold pretty much across the United States right now, no matter where you're at, whether you're in the South or in the Pacific Northwest or in the Northeast, like I am. But yeah, no Penguins hockey for a couple days, but it is what it is. Penguins currently kind of on a roll right now. Nice little 3-0 win against Seattle, and we'll just kick it off right now with the mailbag. I'll take question number one. It's from Brian. Um, uh, if you're a frequent listener, you know that Brian is one of our top question askers. He asked, with Connor Bedard being injured and placed on injured reserve, do you think he'll still win the Calder Trophy, or do you see someone else overtaking him? And my first inclination to say is Connor Bedard is still um, the favorite to win the Calder Trophy as the top rookie in the NHL, unless another player would really just come on strong in this uh, absence of Bedard. I just don't know if there's going to be enough there to overtake him. If Bedard would be out the rest of the year, I would say yes, but Bedard is already back skating. I think he's going to be back well before people expected him to be back. He'll have a cage on. As soon as that jaw is good enough to take contact and some physicality, I think he'll be back on the ice. And I just don't see there being enough gap with him down. Anybody out there being able to close that canyon between him and whoever else might be threatening for um, the trophy this year. So I'm going to say yes, Bedard's still a favorite, unless something would drastically change with his status going forward.
Um, do you- is the Calder? Um, I think I know the answer to this, but just to clarify, is the Calder like strictly stats based?
Generally, yeah. I
Generally,
mean,
because I remember last year
yeah.
Beniers out here in Seattle, he won the Calder and he clearly had the most points.
That's
I think.
generally what the basis is, unless a rookie goaltender, which you rarely see, would just go off, or a defenseman. There's been defensemen that have won it, but again, even those defensemen are putting up big point numbers for rookie defensemen. So yeah, it's mostly stat based.
All right, well, yeah, Connor Bedard is leading the Calder race point wise, but not by a large margin. Fantilli's right there with I think like 25 points, and Cooley's got 20 points. So uh, you never know. One of these guys could go on a heater here, and again, what about playoffs too? Like, does playoffs make
No,
an impact? It doesn't,
no. Mm-mm.
because I'm saying like Bedard's not going to be in the playoffs for potentially maybe even a couple of years.
Yeah.
Where Logan Cooley, he has the potential to not only be in the playoffs, but he's going to have a chance to make an impact with the Coyotes. And I think personally, I would probably, it's not any Pittsburgh bias or anything, but I'd probably be more inclined to cast a vote if I had a vote for somebody who was making that big of an impact with their team. But yeah, you still think Connor Bedard's going to run away with it, even though he's going to miss like 6 weeks.
Yeah, I just don't see that canyon being crossed. Again, it's there. I know it's stat based heavy, but it's also going to be on the impact, and I just don't know if anybody. Um, I mean, Connor Bedard's basically saving that team from being historically awful right now, and I just don't see anybody bridging that gap. And again, and maybe there'll be some factor into like the preseason favorite. It kind of felt bestowed upon Bedard, and it was going to be a tough hill to climb. Even if he had a so-so instead of a standout rookie season, even a so-so rookie season, but he's been spectacular, and I just think that he's the favorite. And unless he would somehow miss the rest of the season, I just don't see anybody bridging that gap.
Fair.
Question 2 from Brian. Again here, this one's going to Stanley. He said, Bob Grove posed a good question, so I wanted to see what you guys thought. Where do you think the Penguins would be today if they held on to John Marino and Sam Lafferty?
Roughly in the same place. I think we should pump the brakes a little bit on this like regret over losing Marino. I think we've talked about this. I didn't like the trade initially. I don't like the way Hextall handled the asset that was Marino. I'll get to Lafferty in a second, but I did a little bit of digging, and like last year, Marino, I mean, he was a bright, I mean, you don't come across like high hockey IQ, right shot defenseman like they came across Marino very often. He was quite the find for them, and that's why I think it's so upsetting the way that Hextall handled that asset. I don't know if you guys take too much stock in this, but I hated that he traded him within the division. I would have liked to have scooted him out somewhere farther away. Let's just like Marino was on a good team last year, and I think I have his stats pulled up somewhere here.
He was on the Devils.
Yeah, he's on the Devils. He's on the Devils. So his first year with the Devils, he had 4 goals, 14 assists for 18 points. I mean, those are decent stats for a young defenseman, but Petrie had a better year statistically that year than Marino. I think that if you were looking for like the big picture, the long run, you'd keep Marino over a guy like Petrie for what Marino could grow into. But Marino wasn't like dragging the Devils to the playoffs by any means. He was on a good team that went to the second round. Erik Karlsson is by far a better upgrade than Marino was or will ever be, even on maybe the worst of days. You got to remember Marino was undersized too, so I honestly don't think that having Marino as a second pairing right shot D is going to put the Penguins in any better place necessarily than where they're at. I'm more upset about, I think, Lafferty being gone, because I think that Lafferty is, and I've talked about this before, but it's like I love the way that Vancouver is utilizing Lafferty. He's a fourth liner. He plays on a line that he's got chemistry on. He just seems like a Tocchet type of guy. We all know Tocchet's out there in Vancouver, and he's got Vancouver just humming right now. But I like that they put Lafferty up in the top 6. They'll put him on the first line on the right wing to in certain scenarios to make space. That's showing that the coach has trust in him. He's got good habits. He bangs the body. He's a brute force out there, but he seems to also be kind of he's being put on the first line. He's not out there to take dumb penalties. He's up there to help produce and make space for their stars. So I'm super bummed that the Leafs, I think he went to Chicago first, right? I think did they trade him for who did they trade him for? That wasn't was it part of the Nylander deal?
Sam Lafferty, yeah, it was like a 1-for-1.
It was a 1-for-1. So yeah, he went to Chicago, then he got a taste of the playoffs with the Leafs, and now he's in Vancouver looking like they might be going on one hell of a run. So as for Brian's question, are they in a better place? I don't necessarily think so. Had they kept them, I think we need to like kind of hold our horses there a little bit. I don't think that they're like, Stanley Cup favorites had we kept them, but it was a mishandling of assets, I like firmly believe. And this question, let's move to question 3 here, going to Garrett, who was kind enough to join us today. Question number 3 coming from Brian. With the way Toronto has handled their cap, you would think old Ronnie Boy was their GM, so Toronto Maple Leafs catching a little flack.
Hello. Yes, I am here. Let's just say I lost track of time before Snail and Robbie hit record, but I am here to answer some of these questions. Boy, oh boy, let's talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs giving that contract to William Nylander. I think the contract is well deserved, and I think it's fair value for what Nylander brings to the table. He's going to have a cap hit of 11.5 million from the 2024-25 season through the 2031-32 season. I think in the short term, next year specifically, 2024-25, the Maple Leafs may struggle next season because of the cap issues that they may run into. I was looking at a salary cap table. Next season, they have Austin Matthews, whose cap hit is 13.25. Nylander's new contract kicks in at 11.5. They still have John Tavares with a cap hit of 11 million, Mitch Marner at 10.903 million, Morgan Riley at 7.5 million. That is a lot of money tied up to how many players is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players. I don't know the total sum off the top of my head, but the thing that I saw most prevalently when Nylander signed that contract was the possibility of the Leafs trading Tavares to shed some of that salary and become cap compliant without trading away like a Matthews or a Marner or a Nylander. So I do wonder with Tavares being up there in age, if he's willing to either, I don't know if he can renegotiate his contract, restructure his contract, or potentially say, say yes, I'll take a trade to somewhere else, because I have to imagine Tavares, who's a Toronto kid, probably wants to stay in Toronto. So very interesting what will happen with the Maple Leafs and their salary cap. I think it's going to be pretty interesting how they try to maneuver that, to say the very least. I think as the salary cap continues to go up, won't be so much more of an issue, but in the short term, perhaps as soon as next season, it may be some short term suffering, but long term, I think everything will probably work out fine for them. Question 4. We are staying with Brian here. I think we're going back to Robbie here. Robbie, why are the Penguins so bad in 3-on-3 overtime? And if you saw this, I forget what, if this wasn't after the Kraken game. Obviously, they won that one, but Carlson made some interesting comments after, I think it was after a loss, a 3-on-3 loss, where Josh Yohe asked him, why do you think they struggle so much? And Carlson said, I have some theories, but I'll keep it to myself. So, Robbie, what do you make of these 3-on-3 woes?
It's just a completely disjointed. It's almost like the power play, just completely disjointed. It feels like everybody's kind of just lost out there, kind of doing their own thing. There doesn't seem to be any kind of accountability on the back end. They just kind of all, there's just no coverage sometimes. Crosby with a bad change against the Hurricanes led to a brief 3-on-2, which was enough for the Hurricanes to score and win. And he kind of, I believe he made a bad change against the Canucks too that led to Pettersson getting his breakaway and scoring. So that way, it seems like there's just bad assignments, just bad pairings, not enough shooting. And when they do shoot, when you're shooting in a 3-on-3, puck's got to be on net, because if you miss, you're kind of caught up ice and the puck bouncing around, you got the other team going the other way, and it's just, you're setting up for a bad situation. As for Erik Karlsson, I think what he said just pals on speculation rather than anything else. He probably would have been better off just not saying anything at all. There's the middle ground here is kind of what he said, and that's not a place you want to be. If he would have just come out and said, I think that we're just irresponsible with the puck, or we lose concentration, that's fine. If he would have just said that we just have to work on things in practice, that's fine. To say that he has ideas of what he thinks the problems are, but he doesn't want to say anything, I think it just opens up a can of worms that we really don't want to get into. It just creates, you don't know what it creates in the locker room, but that's the kind of quote that can create friction. But I don't think it created too much because the Penguins came right back 2 days later and shut out a good Kraken team. So you're better off just saying what is on your mind. But as for the why are they on 3-on-3? I mean, coaching's a part of it. Lack of awareness, just kind of a power play s type situation because the same guys that are on the 3-on-3 are generally on your power play. So yeah, something to work on, but definitely something you need to fix because it's leaving points on the board. Question number 5, going over to Snail here. We have seen reports that Trevor Zegras is on the block. Would you like to see him in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, short answer, yeah, I'd love to see Zegras in Pittsburgh. He's only 22 years old. I believe he's signed right now to a pretty team friendly, almost like a bridge contract. Um, it kind of reminds me of how I felt about like when Bo Horvat was made available by the Canucks. Why not give up some assets or trade a decent player on the roster to sort of mortgage your future with again like another young, talented centerman. We all know that dark days are eventually going to hit the Penguins. For how long, we don't really know. I don't think that the Penguins are necessarily trying to set themselves up for a 7-year Detroit Red Wings esque rebuild or anything. But I've always wondered what a guy like Dubas thinks when a player like this becomes available. Not that you want to like, you're not trying to think about the rebuild already necessarily, but you're getting a good young player that once Sid and Gino, once Father Time starts to catch up to them, they can handle minutes. They can, play on the power play. They're playmakers, create offense. Like, why wouldn't you want a guy like Zegras? And he's got that Michigan in his back pocket. He's got a little flair. I think I'm all for it. I'm all for bringing an exciting young player like that in. And you never know. He gets a little bit of a bad rap for his maybe like lack of attention to details. He's a young, good offensive player. What good young offensive player coming into the league doesn't struggle with the attention to details? But when you put a guy like a Zegras or something into a locker room with the veteran presence and a guy like Sidney Crosby and Malkin and whatever the culture they have in that locker room, you never know what that could do for a player like that. So I'm all for it. Well, I'm curious what either of you guys would think about bringing a guy like Zegras in, hypothetically.
Zegras for Crosby and Malkin straight up.
Well, you heard it here first.
Exactly. You did hear it here first. And that's the last time. I mean, yeah, basically I echo everything Snail said. Like, I don't know what it would realistically take to land a prime Zegras who could accelerate the potential rebuild that the Penguins are trying to keep kicking that can down the road. The Penguins probably don't have enough resources to even entertain the thought of acquiring a Zegras, but for the fun speculation and putting your tinfoil trade hats on, yeah, it's definitely fun to think about.
Fair. All right, let's move on here to question number 6 from Brian, going over to Garrett. Would you rather get rid of goaltender interference or offside reviews?
This is one that I definitely want to roundtable with the both of you because I've been racking my brain trying to think which one would be, if you're getting rid of one review, which one would be less detrimental to the game. I mean, there was a point in time very recently where I don't think we were challenging offsides or goalie interference as much as we are in 2023, 2024. So which one would have a less detrimental impact on the game? Offsides, maybe. I was probably leaning towards scrapping the offsides review and just letting it play with the officials on the ice. I don't know, because I mean I don't even know if the officials know what goalie interference is, and they're the ones calling the penalties.
I think
So
that's the issue. That's because there's not this wouldn't even be a question if there was a clear cut rule on what goaltender interference is. It's an opinion. Like the ref
Yeah, you're probably
It's
right.
his opinion. If there was a clear cut, like if the goalie was bumped in the blue crease, if there was even as so much as a toe of a skate in the blue crease and you bump it, that if that was the rule, there wouldn't need to be a review of it. It would be easy to, you know what I'm trying to say? It would just be
We
easier to recognize, and there wouldn't need to be the game stoppage and them replaying the same clip over and over again. It drives me nuts. I think that if they just cleared up what goaltender interference was, cut and dry, black and white, no gray area, then it wouldn't be that much of an issue.
we took a question in the mailbag last week, I think. It was about goalie interference, and I think I'm pretty sure it was Jake Gensel who had a goal called off due to goalie interference. And then later that same night, I saw the Vegas Golden Knights had a goal called off due to goalie interference or something of the sort. And we were again left scratching our head trying to figure out what goalie interference actually is and how much of a coin flip it's become in this day and age. So I don't know. It's a good hypothetical to see which one should be removed, but like you said, Snail, it's so hard. Goalie interference, especially because it seems like it's a coin flip every time it's called.
Yeah, and goaltender interference, like you said, there's so much gray area in goaltender interference. Generally, if you're offsides, you're offsides. I'm glad they got rid of the idea that if your skate is in the air, you're technically in the zone, but even if it's hanging over the blue line, because again, that is kind of ticky tacky because technically your leg is still in the neutral zone. But for goaltender interference, I mean, what is contact? Like, where is the line? John, Garrett used the example of the Penguins having that one taken off the board while Vegas had one counted, which was basically the same exact play. So I would say goaltender interference, or a more clear cut rule, as in skate increase. I mean, what? Yeah, it's just too much gray area for me on goaltender interference. Would much rather them have, um, much rather keep the offsides and get rid of goaltender interference reviews as currently established, unless there's some kind of more hardline rule put in place for what defines goaltender interference.
I'll drop it after this and we'll move on, but quickly, like, what is the point of the blue paint in the crease if they're not using that to somewhat determine what goaltender interference is? Like, players are entitled to the net front. Like that Gensel goal, Gensel wasn't in the crease. He's entitled to that space in front of the net. Like that should be fair game. And if a goaltender comes out of the blue paint, that's where I would like to see that debated more, because like the goalies have their net and they're safe in their blue paint. Like, and if they go outside of that, if there's contact, they're entering an area where players are entitled to that net front space as well. So it drives me nuts. I cannot stand when they review goaltender interference. You can't bet on that. You have no idea what it's going to be. I'd like to see the gray area eliminated.
With that, as Snail mentioned, we'll move on to question number 7, sticking with Brian here. Robbie, I guess we can roundtable this. I don't think I've ever had Quaker steak and lube, but Brian asks, what's your favorite Quaker steak and lube wing sauce?
Yeah, so I haven't had Quaker steak much in my life either, but for them, I would say uh, just like their garlic butter was my favorite. But in general, my favorite flavor is either garlic parm or spicy ranch. Um, that's pretty much on any wings. Even if I make wings at home, which I do sometimes in the oven, those are my two favorites. Barbecue, if it's the right barbecue sauce. I also like a Cajun rub. That's like a dry rub on mine, but yeah, if I'm going with sauce, I'm going with either garlic parm or spicy ranch.
This is a Pennsylvania chain I see.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Yeah, it looks kind of neat. It sounds like a good time. Quaker steak and lube.
All right, Garrett, you got any thoughts on wing flavors?
I'm not a wing person personally.
Wow,
I thought I made that clear on a prior
you may
podcast.
Oh
have.
yeah,
You may
yeah.
have.
You're a chicken nuggies guy.
Yeah, boneless. Yeah. Well, yeah. For this context, we'll just call them nuggies. But yeah, I'm not a wing person. I do like condiments. I like dipping sauces with my nuggies. So I mean, we had a whole conversation about mustard. I think
We did.
that was pretty entertaining. Speaking of which, I want to bring up. We were talking about mustard last week. After we got done recording that episode specifically, I went on the website that Snail or Robbie put in the chat that we used to record here. The website, I think it's called Beaverton Foods, and I ordered 3 different bottles of mustards, and I have them. They got shipped to my house from Oregon to PA in like 3 days. I was like, wow, that's fast service. And so I will report back when I have a better understanding of the different tastes of the palate. But
What did you got? It was like a hickory
yeah,
mustard.
yeah,
Apple, was it an apple wood
yes,
too?
that too.
And
Yep,
then
just a regular
honey
mustard.
mustards.
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. I can't wait to hear back on. You got to like dedicate a meal tonight
Yeah.
to just sampling musties.
I think I have some boneless tendies in the freezer, so I will conduct some science experiments and report back when appropriate.
Oh yeah, so I guess I ask you the next
Oh,
question.
yeah,
I kind of got lost
me
where we
too.
were. Yeah. So question number 8. No, wait. This next question for Snail. Sorry. Do you think the NHL is missing a huge opportunity to grow the game by not owning Boxing Day, which is the day after Christmas for those unfamiliar? Seems like a good time to have a Frozen Frenzy scheduled every year.
Yeah, I'm all for just like more massive amounts of games on at like at staggered times. I mean, I think that they should find a lot more reasons to throw up the Frozen Frenzy. Boxing Day is a great day. I think during that kind of like 2 week like quote unquote winter break. I know not everybody has the full holiday off, but a lot of people do have it off, and I think that the NHL, it's wintertime. Why not capitalize on just finding reasons to? I know they're kind of competing with the NFL, but I mean, I don't know. Why not get creative? More games on, more viewership. It could only be good. So I think that's a pretty easy one. We all want more hockey to watch, more Penguins games on. All right, Garrett, question 9 for you here. And Brian asks, do you like any of the All-Star jerseys? Have you guys had a chance to check out the All-Star jerseys?
Oh boy, have I. They are quite bluntly an abomination to the eye sockets. They are very bold, very colorful. I think Justin Bieber, if I remember reading correctly, Justin Bieber had a hand in designing these jerseys, and I believe he's rumored to be a celebrity captain alongside Austin Matthews, I believe. But boy, those jerseys are just very vibrant, very punchy. Not for me, I'll say that. But at the same time, I've seen prior iterations of the All-Star jerseys that have been incredibly bland and one note. So like I can't really, come on this side of the spectrum and say these jerseys suck because they're too colorful and too punchy, and then also say that like the jerseys with like a 2-note color scheme from like 3 or 4 years ago are just as good if not better. So while it's not my cup of tea, I mean maybe it is for somebody else, it's just not for me. Anybody else before we move on?
They look like the Carl's Jr. logo, and
Yeah,
I just think
that's a good
everything
comparison.
about the All-Star game just like, I don't know. We're just like older and like grumpy about it, so it's like not really for us, but whatever. I mean, I'm sure that there's some little kid out there that's gonna get that jersey and be stoked on it. So whatever. It's not for us.
Down with the children. Anyway, we will move on here. Uh, question 10, as we go back to Robbie here, question 10 from Brian. With Mike Sullivan recently declaring Riley Smith out with a longer term injury, who do you think is the best option to replace him? Pat and Hunter on the Locked On Penguins podcast mentioned that the Penguins should potentially call the Montreal Canadiens sooner rather than later and talk about a potential Sean Monahan for Pierre-Olivier Joseph trade, give Joseph a change of scenery, and help the Penguins with bottom six depth. Robbie, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, Monahan's definitely an interesting name to throw out there. All depends on. It definitely seems like he's going to be out long past the All-Star break. If a trade like that, that's definitely somebody that you can plug in and would probably help your team. Um, uh, Even when Riley Smith comes back as well. Um, Drew O'Connor's doing a very nice job in that top six right now, but you still need another guy up there, and they don't really have that option uh, anywhere in the system right now, unless they really want to throw um, some other faces from the farm at that problem. But Monahan's a very interesting name, and I actually that's not one that really popped into my head. Yeah, it would not be expensive, obviously, if you could flip POJ for Monahan straight up. That would be fantastic. Um, it saves any other assets that you could use in another trade. So Monahan's definitely an interesting name, but it's not something you can just wait forever to fill because Riley Smith's a top six forward and you need as much scoring as possible to stay in this race. So if they find out that he's going to be out longer than past the All-Star break, I think you'll see Kyle Dubas working the phones sooner rather than later with the trade deadline looming. All right, this question, I guess, yeah, Snell, you can take this one. This is related to number 10 from Brian. What do you think about Drew O'Connor being promoted to the second line? It seems like he's finally starting to figure out the speed of the game at the NHL level, and having those young legs on Gino's line is a plus in Brian's opinion.
Yep, all four DOC being promoted to the top six. I mean, we don't really have a ton of other options, do we? Like, I think
No.
he's kind of the obvious choice to kind of fill those shoes on Gino's line there. I've praised DOC for a while now. I love that he seems to have found his role in what his role in the NHL, especially just on this team in general, would be. He's figuring out that he makes his money around the net. He does have legs. He's kind of, I've called him a north-south player. Gino's the creative centerman on that line. He just needs competent wingers that know where to find him and where to go when he's got the puck, and that usually is directly towards the net. So I'm happy for DOC. I remember in the offseason we talked a lot about Drew O'Connor, almost to the point where it felt a little ridiculous at times because the cupboards are so dry. He's one of the few, like, I don't even know if you could consider him a prospect necessarily. He was maybe aged out of the prospect territory, but we were pretty excited about him, and it took him a little while to really get going, but I'm liking what I'm seeing. I think he is a bottom six guy. I don't know if he's necessarily, like, the production doesn't show that he's a top six guy yet, but he's versatile, and he's got a nose for the net, and I appreciate that about him. We're better with him there than without him. Let's see here. I think we're at question 11. We should probably roundtable this and just kind of, because these rumors have been flying, and Robbie and I touched on it not that long ago. But Brian asks, what are your thoughts on reports that Jake Gensel may be traded at the deadline? Brian understands the sentiment of getting something rather than losing him for nothing, and the return should be sizable, but I just don't see how you can do that. He's too big of a piece to this team.
Am I the only one that thinks that Gensel really probably won't be traded? Like, the Penguins have to be so far out of a playoff spot for them to even think about trading Gensel. And the thing about the Penguins is that they're probably just good enough to be on that cusp, that bubble, to where it's gonna come down to a will they won't they scenario probably if they clinch the playoffs. So with that being said, I mean, I'm forecasting them being on the bubble for the remainder of the season. I don't think that constitutes trading Jake Gensel. Yeah, there have been reports coming out that Dubas and Gensel's representatives the contract talks have kind of stalled, and Gensel sounds like he's more than happy waiting until the end of the season to iron a deal out. Will they trade Gensel? Will they, won't they kind of thing? I don't think Gensel is going anywhere. I think he gets extended in the offseason. Like I said, the Penguins, you're not only waving the white flag on this season. If you trade Gensel, you're probably waving the white flag symbolically, I guess I'll say, on the rest of the Crosby Malkin era by trading Gensel. The Penguins may be competitive without Gensel and whatever kind of haul they get back, but for all intents and purposes, trading away Sidney Crosby's favorite winger, to me anyway, would signify the end, the real end of this era and like the beginning of a potential rebuild of sorts. So, but that is all speculation of sort. I don't think Gensel is going anywhere. I think he remains a Penguin.
I would like to almost like reframe it a little bit. It's like the Penguins, like you said, Garrett, are going to be probably on the cusp, if not in a playoff spot, hovering around one. And like you'd said, I think they need to be pretty far out of it to even consider moving him. But I just don't think, like, do you guys see Jake Gensel really being the first piece moved in, like, you know, let's just call it, like you said, waving the white flag. It's all over. We're starting to sell the farm. Is Jake Gensel really going to be the first guy they part with at the trade deadline? Like, I don't think so. I think that uh, cap is so precious. Let's just like hypothetically put ourselves like the Penguins keep him as like their own rental per se, and they miss the playoffs by, let's say they miss it by 2 points or a point again. Cap is just so precious right now with the state of the NHL. Him walking for nothing, that would sting, but like you get cap space, and that doesn't come. You know, that's hard to find these days. And not only that, but I mean, there's the opportunity that Jake might test the market, and you never. It doesn't mean he's not going to re-sign here. I think there's going to be 31 other teams that will throw a duffel bag full of money at him, but I don't really see it happening. If it did happen, I'd truly be shocked. But hell, the Penguins would get a sizable return from him.
Yeah, I think that he's not going to get traded. I've never really bought into the rumors that he's going to be traded, even if they did put a quote unquote price tag on it. I just think that, like Garrett said, you're throwing in the towel in this season, in a season where you've fought back this far, you're right in the thick of the playoff race, and not only that, you are sacrificing your future, especially when you know the team making the trade for him is going to be a playoff contender. So that first round pick you may get for him is already a back end first rounder. Your prospect that you get, you have no idea, and unless that player, that NHL ready player that coming over is one cheaper and two can produce like Gensel does with Crosby, it's not a trade you're going to win, at least not right now. You make that trade. You sign him to an extension this offseason, and maybe in 3 or 4 years, you make a trade like that when you're fully in a rebuild, but not right now.
Alrighty.
All
With
right.
that, wait, do I ask the question, Snail? I'm confused at this point. We're like
Oh
kind
wait,
of
no, sorry. I think it is actually your question to read. I'm a little messed up here.
all right. I will read this question to Robbie. We'll talk about John Ludwig here. Robbie, would you like to see John Ludwig get a chance to play with Chris Letang when he comes back from injury? Brian says that's a pairing he thinks would be interesting to have.
I mean, it's probably a better option than putting Ryan Graves back there at the moment, and you don't want to put Letang and Carlson together because one, they're two right-handed defensemen, and two, you need at least somebody to try and play defense on these pairings. And Ludwig is probably your best option with what you have on the roster right now. When he comes back, I guess is still TBD. He is skating on his own, but still on IR and still some time to work back yet. But I mean, he has had some time with Letang and hasn't been a complete disaster. But again, small sample size. I would like to see a more in-depth sample size of those two going together. Ludwig has been a pleasant surprise this season for the Penguins. And as long as he doesn't he likes to be physical. So as long as he's not in a position where he's choosing physicality over making the smart play, I don't think it can't hurt to give him a little test drive on align with or a pairing with Chris Letang. Question number 13 for Snail here. With so many contending teams needing goalies, do you move Alex Nedeljkovic at the trade deadline to help with the playoff push? You could get a decent return from a needy playoff contender.
I would say no, because the Penguins clearly they need this tandem that they've got going right now. Like Jari with his injury history and his at times very streaky play. Nedeljkovic is kind of a quieter goaltender, and he's had his fair share of solid games under his belt this season. I just feel that he's too important. He's probably been one of the better signings that Dubas made in the offseason. He's been paying off quite well, especially for his contract. If you look all over the league right now, there's a ton of examples of backup goalies on a $1 or $2 million contract that are playing the majority of games at the moment, whether it's due to just bad play or injuries. So too important right now. I don't really want to rely on a tandem of Jari and Hellberg. No offense to Magnus Hellberg, but he's been in the AHL for a while. I like what we got going with this tandem right now. It's one of the few bright spots from this season. Not to sound too pessimistic or down on the team, but they have been a bright spot, and I'm hesitant to let go of them. It would have to be like a severe overpayment to where you'd have to part with him because this other it was worded here like a needy playoff contender. Like if Edmonton is finally in a playoff position and their goalie Skinner goes down and they're left with Jack Campbell, if they just offer a package that truly wows Dubas or would wow anybody, it's like you might have to, but unless that's the case, I'm hanging on to Ned. All right, question 14 from Brian. And there's a related question here with Kim, so I'm going to package these two together. Cutter Gauthier is the ultimate Philly troll. An unfortunate fallout that has come from this series of events is the negative comments Kevin Hayes has received. If you guys haven't seen, he's gotten some hateful and personal messages. And then following it up with Kim Larson, kind of a related question here, is he wonders what the reason is for Cutter not signing with the Flyers. Who do you think will benefit the most from this trade, whether it's the Flyers or the Anaheim Ducks? And do you think it's okay that young play? This is a question I'd be curious more to roundtable, Garrett. Once you kind of get through this, is it okay that these young players are saying no to the teams that draft them? All Eric Lindros.
This is the part of the question that I want to tackle first and foremost because I think it's the most interesting. Let's talk about this, all three of us here, because I don't know, we may have differing opinions on this. And there are rumors floating about, if you're a fan of the National Football League, that potential number 1 overall selection in this year's draft, quarterback Caleb Williams, may or may not want to play for the Chicago Bears, who own the first overall pick in this year's draft. So we can lump him into this discussion as well, assuming those rumors have a source of validity to them. But let's talk about this, because for so long, you think we as sports fans look at these prospects, these 18, 19-year-olds that get drafted to these professional sports leagues, and your immediate thought for a lot of these players is, boy, it must be great for this 18 or 19 or 17-year-old to finally get his chance to break through, and he's going to come through, he's going to save our franchise, and he's going to be a great player for us for 10, 15 years. But I think a part of sports and sports management that we often overlook is this subject matter right here, where if it's true that Cutter Gauthier, and he has not publicly come out and said that he just openly did not want to play for the Flyers, it's widely assumed and inferred that Gauthier did not want to play for the Flyers, and that's what a lot of media members have been rolling with. So let's assume that's the case. It's rare in this day and age for an 18 or 19-year-old to come out and say, no, I don't want to play for this team. But at the same time, I will defend Cutter Gauthier's decision until I'm blue in the face. I respect it, because I was reading an article from Pro Football Talk, and Mike Florio, who runs and operates Pro Football Talk, described it as this sort of divine intervention where prospects are drafted by your favorite team or someone's favorite team by a combination of luck and draft projection. But these 18, 19-year-olds, I think, as star athletes in the making, are well within their right to say, no, I don't want to play for this team. I don't like this team. I don't like this market. I don't like this city. I don't want to be here. I'd rather be closer to family or this, that, and the other thing. I think Gauthier was well within his right to say, if it's true that I don't want to play for the city of Philadelphia, I don't want to play for the Flyers, I don't want to do it. I respect that because you don't see that very often. I think one of the more famous examples, Snail mentioned Eric Lindros. I'll stick with the NFL. Many years ago, the 2004 draft class, it was widely rumored, if not confirmed, years later that Eli Manning was not going to play for the San Diego Chargers, which then Eli Manning, I think if I have my story correct, Eli Manning gets traded to the New York Giants, or that pick ends up with the New York Giants. Instead of going to the San Diego Chargers, Eli Manning goes to the New York Giants and plays his entire career with the Giants. So it's not like there's no precedent for this sort of thing happening in professional sports, but it's definitely something that is incredibly rare. And you know what? Like I said, I don't care if I see more of it, You as a pro athlete at 18, 19 years old with so much hype around you, you should have a say in where you want to go and make the most amount of money. That's just me. Feel free to roundtable it, and I'll get off my soapbox now.
I just think I kind of wanted to ask you guys this question is like, because I agree wholeheartedly with Garrett. Like, I agree that, I mean, the blood, sweat, and tears that these players put in from Pee Wee to June, the pressure in juniors, and then getting, pretty much being drafted, not playing yet, but being drafted in the NHL. It's such a feat, and it's so rare to happen. Why shouldn't they be able to dictate their own path? And like, there have been other players that have done this, and I don't know if it's because the markets are less, maybe not a whole lot less noisy, but less noisy than Philadelphia is. Adam Fox did the same thing. He said no thank you to, I think it was Carolina or Calgary. He said no thank you again, went back to college, and then he was like, I'm actually just gonna I'm gonna he's from New York. I think his mindset was, I want to see if I can just play for my hometown team, and he won a Norris there, and he's their number one defenseman. So I don't hear a lot of people complaining about him taking the route that he took. I think it's also hypocritical that, I mean, I want to know how many Philadelphia Flyers fans that own a Lindros jersey were hating on Cutter Gauthier, because that's the only reason you got one of the best players to ever wear that sweater. But these are Philly fans. Not, I guess I shouldn't be too shocked. The other thing I wanted to quickly bring up was, because I do believe Cutter Gauthier, I mean, there's no rule against it. He's operating within his rights. I just don't understand why the Philly management were so spiteful and hateful in the press. They were openly like hating on this kid. I mean, wouldn't that deter future prospects? Like, are you afraid to go to Philly because like you see the way that maybe your management operates, that like they're on telecasts, they're in press releases, they're saying, we don't want you, smell you later, you don't want to play for us, having no problem kind of like throwing shrapnel at Cutter Gauthier. I mean, I think it's just kind of a tough look. Why wouldn't you want to be a little bit more like professional in the way you respond to this? And you don't need the theatrics and kind of you don't need to make this kid's life any harder. I think that if they're sour about it, they're within their rights to be sour about it. But I don't know, just kind of a shit show, very Philly-esque, if you ask me. Then yeah, I'll digress, but I kind of feel bad for the kid. He's trying to make it. He has a big opportunity. He had a hell of a World Juniors. He's going to be a stud in the NHL, and it's just a little blip for him. He's probably going to have a great career. I'd assume just his trajectory seems like he's probably going to have a great career, but I do feel a little bad for him because it was a little bit of a circus.
Yeah, I mean, he's using one of the very few cards that he has in his hand to kind of control where he goes. You can speculate why he made the decision. he didn't feel comfortable in Philly and wanted a better, what he felt situation for him. And he was using what cards were available to him, and I can't blame him for that. You have very few when you're a draft pick. That's for any sport, really. And he did what he thought was best for him. You mentioned the Flyers being incredibly spiteful through this whole process, to the point where it almost became like a meme, with how angry everybody was. But yeah, you made a good point about Eric Lindros. Well, I don't want to say it's but basically the same situation. And anytime I saw that brought up online, it was always, it was a little bit. This is how it differs and stuff like that. When, let's be honest, it didn't differ all that much. They were just mad that they got spurned by Cutter Gauthier, basically saying he didn't want to play in Philly. He didn't feel comfortable in Philly, so he kind of took what little control he had, and went to where he thought he felt better. Again, he couldn't necessarily control where he was traded, but he is to an organization that's kind of rebuilding that can use his skill set, and he'll get a chance out in Anaheim. And hey, the Flyers, they got a good player in return. So it was a very odd. I can understand being frustrated, but to the point where you had their general manager and player and hockey ops going on television and basically saying "screw you, kid, we didn't want you anyway" is a very very bizarre behavior.
So salty.
Yeah, just very salty. And then the fan base, I guess. Yeah, I mean, if somebody did have the Penguins, there'd be salty fans online. So I don't blame the fans as much, just because that's probably a natural reaction. But to have like the front office guys like go on television and basically say, "Oh, f you, kid," it's just bizarre, childish behavior, in my opinion.
It's said that he expressed disinterest in playing for the organization last May, which was, I believe, a previous regime as far as the head
Basically,
office.
yeah.
But as a GM, isn't it your job? Like, you have a prime prospect. Isn't it your job to, like, not whine about it, but just do what you got to do? And they got a great player. They got a great return for a prospect who's never even played an NHL game yet. I mean, it's assumed he's going to be a great player, but they're getting a puck-moving right-shot defenseman in Jamie Drysdale. I just don't understand what all the crying's about from this. I get it. It's like mostly fan-driven, but yeah, just a mess from Philly, and I wouldn't expect a whole lot less, honestly.
I can't wait to see Philly somehow ruin the once promising career of Jamie Drysdale, but that's for a conversation for another time. Let's move on to question 15 here. Robbie, we're talking about goaltenders here as we hit the home stretch of the mailbag. This question from Brian. Robbie, what do you think will happen with the goalie tandem next season and beyond? Do you think Joel Blomqvist will continue to be buried in the AHL? Brian says he has been very good this season so far. Dejan Kovacevic made the comparison to Matt Murray this past week, and not the bad Matt Murray. And I pulled up Blomqvist's stats. Blomqvist this season with the Wilkes-Barre Penguins has a 219 goals against average, a 920 save percentage, and a 12-4-3 record. So maybe Blomqvist gets some NHL action next season. Robbie, what do you think about the Penguins' future netminders?
So he is the All-Star selection for the Penguins, for the baby Penguins, for the AHL All-Star game. He's been very good this year. There's no doubt about that. And if he continues this trajectory, this progression in his development, he's not going to get buried in the AHL. They are going to make moves to get him to the NHL. He is the only reason he's spending most of his time in the AHL now is because this is his first full season on North American ice. That's what the game plan for this entire season was. Forget Magnus Hellberg down there. Forget Alex Nedeljkovic. If Blomqvist turns into what they think he can be, he's going to be in the NHL one day. They're going to make sure of that. He's not going to get buried anywhere. He's just down there right now for experience and development. As for immediately next season, I mean, if Alex Nedeljkovic keeps playing like he is, he could very well price himself out of Pittsburgh. So, I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. He's on a 1-year deal, if he keeps playing like he is, I think he could very well leave Pittsburgh on his own accord to get a big payday, and if that happens, props, man. That's what it's all about. Tristan Jarry, I think, is pretty safe in Pittsburgh with that contract that he got this offseason. But if that would be the case, if Nedeljkovic would leave, you reevaluate what backup options are on the market and go from there. Blomqvist, I don't think they would ever put him, as young as he is, as the main backup to Jarry. I think if he would be not quite ready, he would not be the backup. He would get more playing time down in the minors to continue just to stay fresh and maybe a call up later in the season. But if Nedeljkovic walks, I think you'd see Jarry, and then they'd shop the market for another backup, whether that be Hellberg or somebody else out there who may be a free agent next year. We wait and see on that. But and if Nedeljkovic doesn't go for greener pastures, maybe he comes back on another 1-year deal. All depends on how the rest of his season goes. But don't worry about Joel Blomqvist. If he keeps developing like he is, he'll be in the NHL one way or another. The Penguins will absolutely make sure of that.
I gotta quickly ask Robbie, just to stir the pot, is there a world where at the end of this season, they move on from Jarry and keep Ned?
I don't think there is. I think Dubas made his bed with that deal, and I don't know if that's a very movable contract. And again, we've seen Nedeljkovic had one good season as the number one. He's playing well now, but not with the pressures of a number one. So I think if one guy leaves this offseason, unless somebody would walk in with just an absolute phenomenal, again, like you said, somebody walks in with a deal that blows your socks off, you really never say never to something like that. But I still think they would ride with Jarry unless something unforeseen happens. I'm sure they'd love to have both back next year. But I mean, if somebody comes to Nedeljkovic with a big check, you can't blame him for saying no. After he's kind of journeyman-ish. I mean, he's been in a couple different teams now. He was in the AHL a long time. You wouldn't blame him for taking. If somebody comes in 2 years, $5 million, $6 million, you can't blame a guy for jumping at that. That's life-changing money for a guy that's been kind of all around. So, I think it's Jarry. I think Dubas kind of made his bed with that for better or for worse. And so far, Jarry's, for the most part, made Dubas look good on that. So we'll see how that keeps going. But I still think Jarry is the number one for at least the next year or two, unless, something unforeseen happens. Question number 16, last but not least for this episode, we'll give it to Snail to wrap it up. Where would this defensive core be if the trade rumors about Pettersson had turned into reality? Dude has been a stud for the past 2 years and is only getting better.
Yeah, probably being the defensive core would probably be worse. Simply, it's Pettersson's been great. If you guys remember, he was a second round pick. I think Sprong was a second round pick. They swapped him, traded an offensive minded winger / center at times for a young Pettersson, who turned into a pretty much safely Brian Dumoulin's replacement. If not better than Dumoulin at times. I know Dumoulin's impact in those first couple of cup runs was immeasurable. He was so important as a leader on this team, but you could argue that Pettersson is filling those shoes quite nicely. No regrets, I believe, there, and it's good that they hung on to them. I think it was in the Hextall regime that his name was floated out there quite a bit as an attractive maybe trade deadline piece or offensive or off-season move, but thankfully they didn't move on from him because he's top pairing left D right now. So thankfully that never came to fruition.
Fellas, we had an XL mailbag today, and we're gonna have another XL mailbag when we reconvene on Thursday evening for part 2 of the mailbag. Even more of your questions. I believe we have 16 more questions coming your way when we record later this week. Questions coming from Kim Larson. Who else? Kim Larson, Brian, Tony Gale, Edward Beckham, some loser named Snail. We have a ton of questions to answer on Thursday when we come back for part 2. But until then, for Robbie, for Snail, I have been Garrett Bahana. Thank you so much for listening to another edition of the Skating Penguin Network Mailbag, and we will talk to all of you again very soon.